The Vietnam War, a complex conflict. The Vietnam War, also known as the Second Indochina War, was a protracted and highly controversial conflict that took place in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia from November 1, 1955, to the fall of Saigon on April 30, 1975. It was one of the most significant and divisive wars of the 20th century, leaving an enduring impact on the countries involved and reshaping the geopolitics of Southeast Asia. This video delves into the origins, key events, major actors, and lasting consequences of the Vietnam War, shedding light on its complex and multifaceted nature. The historical context. 1. Colonial history. Vietnam had a long history of foreign rule, with various colonial powers, including the Chinese and the French, exerting control over the region. Vietnamese nationalism and anti-colonial sentiment grew throughout the 20th century. 2. Cold War dynamics. The Vietnam War was a product of the Cold War, a period of intense ideological and geopolitical rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union. The Cold War played a crucial role in shaping the course of the conflict. The origins of the conflict. 1. First Indochina War. The First Indochina War, 1946–1954, pitted Vietnamese Communist forces, known as the Viet Minh and led by Ho Chi Minh, against French colonial rule. The conflict ended with the 1954 Geneva Accords, which temporarily divided Vietnam along the 17th parallel. 2. Division of Vietnam. The Geneva Accords led to the division of Vietnam into two separate entities: the Communist-controlled Democratic Republic of Vietnam, North Vietnam, led by Ho Chi Minh, and the Anti-Communist Republic of Vietnam, South Vietnam, led by Ngo Dinh Diem. Major actors in the conflict. 1. North Vietnam. North Vietnam, under the leadership of Ho Chi Minh, was committed to reunifying Vietnam under communist rule. It received support from the Soviet Union and China. 2. South Vietnam. South Vietnam, led by Ngo Dinh Diem and later a series of military regimes, was supported by the United States. It aimed to resist communist expansion in Southeast Asia. 3. United States. The United States became deeply involved in the conflict, providing military and financial assistance to South Vietnam in its struggle against communist forces. The U.S. viewed Vietnam as a crucial battleground in the broader Cold War. 4. Soviet Union and China. The Soviet Union and China provided varying levels of support to North Vietnam, with China playing a more significant role, including sending troops to assist North Vietnamese forces. Escalation of the conflict. 1. Gulf of Tonkin incident. In August 1964, the Gulf of Tonkin incident occurred when North Vietnamese boats allegedly attacked American naval vessels in the Gulf of Tonkin. This event led to the passage of the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, granting President Lyndon B. Johnson broad authority to escalate U.S. involvement in Vietnam. 2. U.S. troop buildup. The United States escalated its military presence in Vietnam, deploying hundreds of thousands of troops by the mid-1960s. The conflict shifted from primarily an advisory role to full-scale combat. 3. Tactics and strategies. The Vietnam War saw a range of military strategies and tactics, including conventional warfare, guerrilla warfare by the Viet Cong, communist insurgents in South Vietnam, and extensive bombing campaigns by U.S. forces. 1. Tet Offensive, 1968. The Tet Offensive, a major communist offensive during the Vietnamese New Year holiday, shocked the United States and its allies. While it was militarily unsuccessful for the Communists, it had a significant psychological impact on American public opinion. 2. My Lai Massacre, 1968. The My Lai Massacre, in which American soldiers killed hundreds of unarmed South Vietnamese civilians, including women and children, shocked the world and further fueled anti-war sentiment. 3. Vietnamization, late 1960s. The Nixon administration pursued a policy of Vietnamization, which aimed to shift the burden of combat to South Vietnamese forces while withdrawing U.S. troops. This marked a shift in U.S. strategy. 4. Paris Peace Accords, 1973. The Paris Peace Accords in 1973 brought a formal end to U.S. military involvement in Vietnam. The United States withdrew its troops, and a ceasefire was declared. Consequences of the Vietnam War. 1. Human toll. The Vietnam War had a devastating human toll, with millions of Vietnamese and tens of thousands of American and Allied soldiers killed or wounded. Additionally, millions of Vietnamese civilians were affected by the conflict. 2. Environmental damage. The extensive use of herbicides like Agent Orange by the United States during the war resulted in long-lasting environmental damage and health issues for those exposed to these chemicals. 3. Economic impact. The war placed a tremendous economic burden on the United States, contributing to inflation and budget deficits. Vietnam's economy suffered greatly as well. 4. Political fallout. The Vietnam War had significant political consequences in the United States, including widespread anti-war protests, the emergence of the counterculture movement, and the resignation of President Richard Nixon amid the Watergate scandal. The Vietnam War was a protracted and divisive conflict that shaped the course of history for both the United States and Vietnam. It revealed the complexities of modern warfare, the impact of public opinion on policy decisions, and the lasting consequences of armed conflict. As a deeply polarizing event, the Vietnam War underscores the importance of diplomacy, conflict resolution, and understanding the human costs of war. Its legacy continues to influence international relations, military strategy, and the collective memory of nations involved.